and welcome back to another edition of Metcalf's Movie Journal. This is the show where I do quick reviews for the movies that I watch, give them a score out of 10, and then add them to my list. So let's see what movie we're reviewing today. On April 17th, I watched Layer Cake, which came out in 2004. And for me, this is back-to-back Daniel Craig not being James Bond movies. But this one actually came out 2 years before his first appearance as James Bond. And maybe it's because the character he plays here is basically just the criminal version of the super spy. It's a lot easier to reconcile him in this role as opposed to the previous movie I reviewed, Logan Lucky, where he played Joe Bang. This is also the directorial debut for Matthew Vaughn, who would go on to direct Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, and the obvious spiritual successor to this one, The Kingsman. On paper, the story here plays out much like many other movies about an extremely professional drug dealer who just wants to retire from the game, but of course his boss has other plans. So even though I usually want to give the writer most of the credit for a movie's success, here I really think Matthew Vaughn deserves that honor, for being able to elevate what would otherwise have been a movie I'd basically already seen. This is especially true since his style can be so clearly defined in those 2 Kingsman films, and everything about Layer Cake makes it feel like a practice run or a rough edit he needed to get out of the way before he could produce the more finished product that was The Kingsman. Outside of Craig, there was never enough supporting talent to keep the other scenes afloat, and George Harris as Morty and Cole Meany as Gene were forced to play above their talent level to try and keep up with him, and it's never a good thing when there's such an obvious gap in acting talent. The only actor in this film that could have easily kept up with him would have been Tom Hardy, but he probably just wasn't famous enough yet, so he just ends up making a very recognizable background character, to the point that it ends up drawing undue attention to how unimportant and underutilized him and the other henchman characters were. The mob boss Jimmy was played by Kenneth Graham, who I didn't recognize, but he had the same level of British authoritarianism that Alan Ford had as Bricktop in Snatch, with a little less cunning and a lot more craziness, but overall, very similar characters. It was no surprise to find out Vaughn was a producer on Snatch before he ever got into the director's chair, because that Guy Ritchie influence can be felt in all of his work, even where you might not expect it in the likes of X-Men. But I think the biggest weakness in his films so far, and it's especially true with Layer Cake, is in the romantic relationships, which only end up feeling rushed and forced, juxtaposed to these great action scenes. Sienna Miller plays Tammy, but for the hour and 45 minutes that this movie ran, I would guess she was on screen for about 15 minutes. So there just wasn't close to enough time to develop the relationship to make it as important as it needed to be for the plot. There's a lot of good pieces here, but where sometimes the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts, I think the opposite is true here. And what could have been another truly great action movie was instead just another run-of-the-mill drug dealer story. And if it wasn't for that cool Matthew Vaughn veneer, it would have been genuinely boring. His style really does make up for a lot of lacking elements here. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 10, and it landed at number 835 on my list, putting it right here, in between Hancock and Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And as always, thanks for watching another edition of Metcalf's Movie Journal. Be sure to click like and subscribe for new videos every week. And if you have a movie that you really want me to watch, be sure to drop me a comment.